Welcome to the 90th most popular podcast in the universe. This is part 3 of Dante's Inferno 4-part series.
Canto XVIII. There is in hell a place called Malebolge, made of stone the color of iron, like the circle that encloses it. In the exact center of the evil field there gapes a broad, deep pit, whose fashion I will tell suo loco. The belt that remains, then, is round, between the pit and the foot of the high, hard bank, and its bottom is divided into 10 valleys. As, where to guard the walls many moats gird castles, their placing traces a pattern. Such an image these valleys made there. And as from the thresholds of such fortresses, bridges lead to the outside bank. So, from the base of the cliff, ridges moved that cut across the banks and the ditches, as far as the pit that truncates and gathers them in. In this place, shaken from Gerion's back, we found ourselves, and my poet moved toward the left, and I followed him. On my right hand I saw new cause for pity, new torments and new wielders of the whip, of which the first pocket was full. At the bottom were the sinners, naked. On this side of the midpoint they came with their faces toward us. On the other side in our direction, but with longer steps. As the Romans, the year of the Jubilee, because of the great throng, found a way to move people across the bridge. For on one side they are all turned toward the castle and are going toward St. Peter, and on the other they are going toward the mountain. Here and there, along the dark rock, I saw horned demons with great whips who were beating them from behind. Ah, how the first blow made each lift his heels. None waited for the second or third. As I was walking, my eye fell on one. Immediately I said, I am certainly not fasting for sight of him. And so I stopped my pace to make out his features, and my sweet leader stopped with me and consented that I walk a little backward. And that whipped one thought to hide my lowering his face. But it little availed him, for I said, O you who cast your eyes to the earth, if your features are not false, you are Venedico Cacenemio. But what leads you to such pungent sauces? And he to me, unwillingly I say it, but your clear speech compels me, reminding me of the former world. It is I who induced Gisto la Bella to the Marchese's will, however they tell the shameful tale. And not only I weep here from Bologna, for this place is so full of us that not so many tongues have learned to say Sipa now between the Savena and the Reno. And if you want proof or testimony of that, bring to mind our greedy breast. As he was speaking, a demon struck him with his scourge and said, Away, pimp! Here are no females to coin. I caught up with my guide, then after a few steps we came to where the ridge went out from the bank. Easily we climbed it, and, turning to the right along its spine, we left those eternal circlings. When we were above, where it gapes to give passage to the whipped ones, my leader said, Wait and let the sight of these other ill-born ones strike you, many of whose faces you have not seen, since they have walked together with us. From the old bridge we looked down on the file that was coming toward us on the other side, likewise driven by the lash. And my good master, without my asking, said, Look at that tall one coming, who does not seem to be shedding any tears for the pain. How regal is his bearing still. That is Jason, who by courage and wit robbed the Colchicans of the ram. He visited the island of Lemnos after the bold, pitiless women had put all their males to death. There, with tokens and elaborate words, he deceived Isipole, the young girl who, before that, had deceived all the other women. He left her there pregnant and alone. Such guilt condemns him to this punishment, and also for Medea, vengeance is taken. Those walk with him who deceive in that direction. and let this be enough to know about the first ditch and those it grinds in its teeth. Already we had come to where the narrow passage intersects the second bank and makes of it the support for another arch. From there we heard people whimpering in the next pocket and puffing with their snouts and striking themselves with their palms. The banks were encrusted with a mold from the breath from below that condenses there, which assailed both eyes and nose. The bottom is so deep that no vantage point is sufficient without climbing on the back of the arch, where the ridge is highest. There we came, and from there I saw, down in the ditch, people immersed in dung that seemed to have come from human privies. And while I was searching with my eyes down there, I saw one with his head so filthy with shit that whether he was lay or clerk did not show. He scolded me. Why are you so hungry to look more at me than the other filthy ones? And I to him, because, if I recall well, I have seen you before with dry hair, and you are Alessio in Termine of Lucca, therefore I eye you more than all the others. And he again, beating his noggin, I am submerged down here by the flatteries with which my tongue was never cloyed. After that, my leader told me, see that you push your eye a little further on, so that it attains the face of that filthy baggage with disordered hair who is scratching herself with her shitty nails, now squatting, now standing on her feet. That is Thais, the whore who, when he said, do I find great favor with you, replied to her lover, marvelous favor indeed. And therewith let our eyes be sated. Canto XIX. Simon, Magus, O wretched followers, you who the things of God, that should be brides of goodness, rapaciously adulterate for gold and for silver, now the trumpet must sound for you, because you are in the third pocket. We had already climbed to that part of the ridge that is exactly above the center of the next tomb. O highest wisdom, how great is the art you show in the heavens, on earth, and in the evil world, and how justly your power distributes. I saw, along the sides and the bottom, the livid rock perforated with holes, all of the same size, and each was round. They seemed no less ample nor greater than those in my lovely San Giovanni, made as places for the baptizers. One of which, not many years ago, I broke because of one drowning inside it, and let this be a seal to undeceive all men. From the mouth of each protruded the feet and the legs of a sinner, as far as the thighs, and the rest was inside. All of them had both souls of flame, therefore they wriggled their joints so violently that they would have broken twisted withies or braided ropes. As the flaming of oily things moves over just the outer rind, so did it there from heel to toes. Who is that one, master, who shows the torture by wriggling more than his other companions? I said, and whom a ruddier flame sucks at. And he to me, if you wish me to carry you there, down the bank that is less steep, from him you will learn of him and his wrongs. And I, so much is pleasant to me as pleases you. You are my Lord. You know that I do not depart from your will, and you know what I leave unsaid. Then we came to the fourth bank. We turned and descended to the left, down there into the narrow, perforated ditch. My good master did not put me down from his hip until we reached the place of him who was weeping so with his shanks. Oh, whatever you are, you who hold your upside-down, sorrowing soul, planted like a pole, I began speaking. If you can, say a word. I was standing like the friar that confesses the treacherous assassin, who, once he is fixed in the earth, calls him back so as to put off his death. And he cried out, Are you already standing there? Are you already standing there? Boniface, the writing lied to me by several years. Are you so soon sated by the wealth for which you did not fear to marry the lovely lady fraudulently and then to tear her apart? I became like those who, not understanding what is said to them, stand as if mocked, at a loss for reply. Then Virgil said, "Tell him quickly, I am not he. I am not he you suppose." And I replied as it was commanded me. Therefore the spirit twisted its feet. Next, sighing its voice full of tears, it said to me, "Then what do you want from me? If it matters so much to know who I am, that just for this you have run down the bank, know that I was clothed in the great mantle. And truly I was a son of the she-bear, so greedy to advance her cubs, that I pocketed wealth up there, and myself down here. Beneath my head are driven the others who preceded me in simony, squeezed into the cracks of the rock. I too will fall down there when he comes who I believed you to be, when I asked my sudden question. But it has been a longer time than my feet have burned, and that I have been upside down like this, then he will be planted with red feet. So after him will come, from towards the west, a lawless shepherd of even uglier deeds, such that he will cover both him and me. He will be a new Jason, like the one we read of in Maccabees. And as his king was indulgent to the first one, so the ruler of France will be to him. I do not know if here I became too rash, but I replied to him in this meter. Ah, now tell me, how much treasure did our Lord demand from St. Peter before he gave the keys into his keeping? Surely he asked only, "Follow me." Neither Peter nor the others took from Mattia gold or silver, when he was chosen for the place lost by the wicked soul. Therefore stay here, for you deserve your punishment, and be sure to keep your ill-gotten coin, which made you bold against Charles. And were it not that I am forbidden by my reverence for the highest keys, which you held in happy life, I would use still heavier words, for your avarice afflicts the world, trampling the good and raising up the wicked. Of you, shepherds, the evangelist took note, when he saw her who sits upon the waters whoring with the kings, she who was born with 7 heads, and took strength from her 10 horns, as long as virtue pleased her husband. You have made gold and silver your god, and what difference is there between you and the idol worshipper, except that he prays to one and you to 100? Ah, Constantine, not your conversion, but that dowry which the first rich father took from you, has been the mother of so much evil. And while I was singing these notes to him, whether it was anger or conscience that was biting him, he kicked violently with both his feet. I firmly believe that it pleased my leader. With such a contented smile he listened still to the sound of the true words I spoke. Therefore with both arms he seized me, and when he had lifted me up to his breast, he climbed back up by the way he had come down. Nor did he tire of holding me embraced, but carried me to the top of the arch that gives passage from the 4th to the 5th bank. There he gently put his burden down, gently on the rough, steep ridge, which even for she-goats would be a difficult crossing. From there, another valley was revealed to me. Canto XX. Of a strange new punishment I must make verses and take matter for the 20th song in this first canticle, which is of those submerged. I was already bent over to gaze into the uncovered depth, which was bathed with anguished weeping, and I saw people coming along the curving valley, silent and shedding tears at the pace taken by litanies in this world. As my gaze went lower on them, I saw that each was marvelously twisted between the chin and the beginning of the chest. For the face was turned toward the kidneys, and they were forced to walk backwards, since seeing forward was taken from them. Perhaps the force of paralysis at some time has contorted someone so completely, but I've never seen it, nor do I believe it can be. So may God permit you, reader, to take profit from your reading. Now think for yourself how I could keep dry eyes. When from close by I saw our image so twisted that the tears of their eyes were bathing their buttocks down the cleft. Surely I wept, leaning on one of the rocks of the hard ridge, so that my guide said to me, "Are you still one of the other fools?" Here pity lives when it is quite dead. Who is more wicked than one who brings passion to God's judgment? Raise your head, raise it, and see the ones for whom the earth opened before the eyes of the Thebans, so that they all cried, "Where are you rushing, Amphiorus? Why are you leaving the war?" And he did not stop falling downward until he reached Minos, who seizes each one. Look how he has made his breast his back. Because he wished to see too far ahead, now he looks backward and treads a backward path. See Tiresias, who changed shape when he turned from male to female, changing all his members, every one. And then he had to strike the two entangled serpents with his staff once more, before he could regain his male plumage. Aronta is the one who backs up against his belly there, in the mountains of Luni, where the Carrarese hoes, who lives below. He had a cave in the white marble for his dwelling, whence the view of the stars and the sea was not cut off. And she who covers up her breasts, which you cannot see, with her loosened tresses, and has every hairy skin on the other side, was Manto, who searched through many lands. Finally she settled where I was born. Therefore I wish you to listen for a little. After her father departed from life, and the city of Bacchus was enslaved, for a long time she wandered through the world. Up in beautiful Italy there lies a lake, at the foot of the Alps that close in Germany above the Tyrol, whose name is Benaco. 1,000 springs, I think, and more, bathe the land between Garda and Valcamonica and the Alps, with the water that collects in the lake. In the center there is a place where the shepherds of Trento and Brescia and the Veronese could all give blessing if they made the journey. Peschiera sits there, a handsome, strong fortress, to hold the front against the Brescians and the Bergamascus, where the shore around it is lowest. There must fall whatever cannot stay in Benaco, becoming a river through the green fields. As soon as the water begins to flow, it is no longer called Benaco, but Mencio, as far as Governovo, where it falls into the Po. It has not flowed far before finding a depression in which it spreads out and becomes a swamp, and in the summer it is often noxious. Passing there, the harsh virgin saw land in the midst of the fens, uncultivated and bare of people. There, to flee all human fellowship, with her servants she stayed to ply her arts, there lived, and there left her empty body. The people who were scattered about later gathered to that spot, which the swamp in all directions made strong. They built their city over those dead bones, and, after her who first chose the place, they named it Mantua without any other augury. The people housed there used to be more numerous, before the fool of Casalodi was deceived by Pinamonte. Therefore I advise you, if you ever hear any other origin given for my city, that you let no lie defraud the truth. And I, Master, your discourse is so sure and so gains my belief that any others would be spent coals to me. But among the people in this procession, tell me if you see any worthy of note, for my mind still comes back to that alone. Then he told me, that one, who from his cheek spreads his beard down over his dark shoulders, was, when Greece was emptied of males, so that hardly any remained in the cradles, an augur, and along with Calchas, he determined the point to cut the first ship's cable in Aulis. Eurypylus was his name, and thus my high tragedy sings of him at one place. You know that well, for you know it through and through. That other who is so slender in the flanks was Michael Scott, who truly knew the game of magic frauds. See Guido Bonatti. See as Dante, who now wishes he had attended to his leather and his thread, but repents too late. See the wretched women who left their needles, their spindles, and their distaffs, and became soothsayers. They cast spells with herbs and images. But come along now, for Cain with his thorns now holds the boundary of the two hemispheres and touches the wave below Seville, and already last night the moon was full. You must remember it well, for several times it did not harm you in the deep forest. So he spoke to me, and we walked meanwhile. Canto XXI. Thus we went from bridge to bridge, speaking of other things my comedy does not record. And we were at the summit when we stood still to see the next cleft of Malebolge, and the next vein weeping, and I saw it to be wondrously dark. As the Venetians' arsenal in winter, the tenacious pitch boils to recock their worn ships, for they cannot sail. Instead, this man works on a new ship. That one plugs the ribs of a craft that has made many voyages. This one repairs at the prow, this one at the stern. Another makes oars, another twists shrouds, another patches foresail and mainsail. So, heated not by fire but by God's art, a thick pitch boiled there, that clung to the banks on every side. I saw it, but in it I saw nothing but the bubbles that the boiling brought up, and the pitch all swelling out and subsiding deflated. When I was gazing fixedly down at it, my leader, saying, look out, drew me from where I was standing. Then I turned, like one eager to see what he must escape, whom sudden fear robs of vigor, and, though he looks, does not delay departure, and I saw behind us a black devil running along the ridge. Ah, how fierce he looked, and how cruel his bearing seemed to me with his open wings, so light on his feet. His shoulder, which was sharp and high, was loaded down with a sinner's 2 hips, and he held hooked with his claw the sinews of both feet. From our bridge he said, O Malebranche, here is one of the elders of Santa Zita. Put him under. I am going back for more to that city, which is well supplied with them. Every one is a grafter there, except Bonturo. For money there they turn no into yes. He threw him down and turned on the stony ridge, and never was a mastiff loosed with more haste to pursue a thief. The sinner plunged and came back to the surface, bottom up, but the demons hidden beneath the bridge cried, Here we don't show the Santo Volto. Here the swimming is different than in the Cerchio. So if you don't want to feel our grapples, don't protrude above the pitch. After they made him feel the teeth of 100 prongs, they said, Down here you have to dance covered up, and if you can, grab secretly. Not otherwise do cooks have their servants push down with hooks the meat cooking in a broth, so that it may not float. My good master said to me, So it may not appear that you are here, squat down behind a projecting rock to hide. And no matter what harm they offer me, do not you be afraid, for I have foreseen everything. I have already been present at these deals. Then he passed beyond the bridgehead, and as he reached the 6th bank, he needed to have a confident brow. With the fury and tempestuous noise of dogs coming out at a poor man who stops and begs from where he stands, So they came forth from under the bridge and pointed all their grappling hooks toward him. But he cried, "Let none of you think to harm. Before your hooks seize me, let one of you come forward to hear me, and then you may take counsel to grapple hook me." All cried, "Go, Malakota!" And one stepped forth while the other stood still, and came to Virgil, saying, "What good will it do him? Do you think, Malakota, that you see me here," said my master, "once already safe from all your tricks, without God's will and favorable fate? Allow us to walk on, for it is willed in heaven that I guide someone on this savage journey." Then his pride fell so that he let his hook droop to his feet, and he said to the others, "Now he mustn't be gored." And my leader to me, "O you, sitting among the rocks of the bridge all a squat, you can return to me safely now." Therefore I moved and went to him swiftly, and the devils all started forward, so that I was afraid they would not keep the pact. Thus once I saw the foot soldiers fear, coming out of Caprona, under safe conduct, seeing themselves among so many enemies. I drew close to my leader with all my person, and I did not turn my eyes from their expression, which was not good. They pointed their prongs, and, "Want me to nudge him?" one said to the other. "On the rump?" And they replied, "Yes, give it to him on the notch." But that demon who was parleying with my leader turned swiftly about, saying, "Down, down, Scarmiglione." Then he said to us, "Further along this ridge you cannot go, for the sixth arch lies all shattered at the bottom. But if you still wish to go forward, walk along this bank. Nearby is another ridge that makes a path. Yesterday, 5 hours later than now, 1,266 years were completed since the way was broken here. I'm sending some of these in that direction to see if anyone is erring himself. Go with them, they will not be troublesome. Come forward, Alecchino and Calabrina," he began to say, "and you, Cagnazzo, and Barbaricia, command the squad. Libicoco, come here, and Dragignazzo, Cirbiato, with his tusks, and Graffiacane, and Farfarello, and crazy Rubicante. Inspect the boiling bird lime. Let these be safe until the next ridge that goes undamaged over the pits." "Oh me, master, what do I see?" I said. "Ah, let us go alone, without escort. If you know the way, I don't ask it for myself. If you are as alert as usual, don't you see how they are grinding their teeth and how their eyebrows threaten treachery?" And he to me, "I would not have you fear. Let them snarl as much as they please. They are doing that for the sufferers in the stew." They made left face on the bank, but first each had bit his tongue toward their leader, as a salute, and he of his ass had made a trumpet. Canto XXII. I have seen knights setting forth, beginning assaults and standing muster, and sometimes retreating to save themselves. I have seen mounted men coursing your city. O Arentines, I have seen foragers riding, tournaments striking, and jousts running, sometimes with trumpets, sometimes with bells, with drums or signals from the tower, with things both our own and foreign. But never at so strange a pipe have I seen horsemen or foot soldiers setting forth, nor a ship at a sign from land or star. We were walking with the 10 demons. Ah, fierce company! But in church with the saints, in the tavern with the gluttons. My attention was all given to the pitch, to see every condition of the moat and of the people burned in it. As dolphins do when they signal to sailors, arching their spines, to take measures to save their ship, so from time to time, to lessen the pain, a sinner would show his back and hide it in less than a flash. And as at the edge of a ditch the bullfrogs sit, with only their snouts showing, hiding their feet and thick bodies, So on every side did the sinners. But as Barbaricha came near, like frogs they withdrew into the boiling. I saw one wait, and my heart still makes me shudder at it, as sometimes one frog stays while the other jumps. And Grafia Khan, who was closest, hooked his grapple in his pitchy locks and drew him up, so that he seemed to me like an otter. I had learned all their names. They made such an impression on me when they were chosen and when they called to each other. "Oh, Rubicante, see that you get your nails in him and tear his skin off." All those cursed ones were shouting at once. And I, "My master, see if you can discover who this wretch is who has come into the hands of his enemies." My master stood alongside him. He asked him where he was from, and he replied, "I was born in the kingdom of Navarre. My mother placed me in the service of a lord. She had generated me by a wastrel, destroyer of his wealth and of himself. Then I was in the household of good King Tebaldo, and there I took to barratry, for which I square accounts in this heat. And Chiriato, from whose mouth on each side came a tusk like a boar's, let him feel how one of them could rip. Among bad cats had the mouse arrived, but Barbaricha enclosed him with his arms and said, 'Stay over there, while I have him gripped.' Then he turned his face toward my master. 'Ask again,' he said, 'if you want to know more from him before someone does him in.' My leader, therefore, 'Now say, among the other sinners under the pitch, do you know any who is Italian?' And he, 'I left one a moment ago, who is from near there. Would I were still hidden with him, I'd not fear claw or crook.' And Libicoco said, 'We've been patient too long.' And he hooked one arm with his pruning knife and pulled, tearing out a muscle. Dragignazzo, too, wanted to hook him below at the legs, and which their decurion whirled about with an evil look. When they had quieted down a little, without delay my master asked the soul, who was still gazing at his wound, 'Who is he you say you should not have left for the shore?' And he replied, 'It was Brother Gomita, the one from Galura, vessel of every fraud, who had his master's enemies in his hand and treated them so that each is thankful to him. He took their money and let them go scot-free, as he tells it. And in his other duties, too, he was not a small berater, but a champion. Master Michel Zanche of Logodoro keeps company with him, and their tongues never tire of speaking about Sardinia. Oh me, look at this other one snarling. I would say more, but I'm afraid he's getting ready to scratch my scurf.' And the great officer, turning to Farfarello, whose eyes were bulging to strike, said, 'Get over there, wicked bird. If you want to see or hear,' the terrified wretch began again, 'Tuscans or Lombards, I can make them come, but let the Malebranche stand a little apart, so they won't be frightened of their cruelty, and I, sitting right here, for one that I am, will make 7 come when I whistle, as is our custom to do when one of us is a lookout.' At that, Cagnazzo lifted his snout, shaking his head, and said, 'Listen to the trick he's thought of, so he can jump back in.' Therefore he, who had a great wealth of snares, replied, 'I am really very tricky, if I procure more suffering for my own kind.' Alekin could not hold back and, against the others, told him, 'If you go down, I won't come after you at a gallop, but beating my wings above the pitch. Let's leave the ridge and hide behind the bank, and we'll see if all by yourself you can outdo us. O you who read, you will hear strange sport.' Each of them turned his eyes toward the other bank, and he first who had been most unwilling. The Navarrese chose his moment well, planted his feet on the ground, and in one point jumped and escaped their design. For that each felt the stab of guilt, but most of all, he who had caused the fault. So he moved, crying, "You're caught!" But it did no good, for his wings could not outspeed the other's fear. The shade dove under, and he straightened his breast to fly back up. Not otherwise does the duck suddenly disappear when the falcon approaches, and he goes back up, angry and ruffled. Calcabrina, angered by the trick, was flying just behind him, hoping the soul would escape, eager to have a scrap. And when the berater had disappeared, he turned his talons against his fellow and grappled him above the ditch. But the other was a full-grown hawk to grapple him, and both of them fell into the boiling pool. The heat was a quick ungrappler, but not for that could they come forth. They had so enlimed their wings. Barbaricha, grieving with his fellows, sent 4 flying to the inner bank with their hooks, and quickly enough, on this side and that, they flew to their posts. They held out their hooks toward the viscous ones, who were already cooked within their crusts, and we left them thus entangled. Canto XXIII. Silent, alone, without companions, we were walking one before, the other after, as friars minor go their way. Because of the present scuffle, my thoughts had turned to that fable by Aesop, where he spoke of the frog and the rat. For Mo and Isa are not more alike than the scuffle and the fable, if one couples beginning and end with close attention. And, as one thought bursts out of another, so another was born from that one, and it redoubled my former fear. I considered, these through us have suffered shame with harm, and with mockery that I believe will bitterly wound them. If anger is spooled onto their ill will, they will come after us, crueler than a dog after the hare he snaps at. Already I felt all my hairs curling with fear, and I kept looking back when I said, "Master, if you do not hide yourself and me quickly, I am frightened of the Malebolge. They are already behind us. I imagine them so strongly, I already hear them." And he, "If I were made of leaded glass, I would not catch your outer image any faster than I grasp your inner one. Just now your thoughts came among mine, with similar bearing and similar face, so that I have made a single counsel of them. If the right bank slopes so that we can go down into the next pocket, we will escape the imagined pursuit." He had not finished giving this advice when I saw them coming, with outstretched wings, not far away, intent on seizing us. My leader seized me quickly, like a mother who is awakened by the noise and sees the flames burning close by, who takes up her son and flees, caring more for him than for herself, not stopping even to put on her shift. And down from the neck of the hard bank, he gave himself supine to the sloping rock that encloses the near side of the next pocket. Water has never coursed more swiftly down a sluice to turn the wheels of a land mill as it approaches the paddles, than did my master down that wall, carrying me along on his breast like his son, not his companion. Hardly had his feet touched the bed of the ditch when the devils appeared on the bank above us, but now there was nothing to fear, for the high providence that placed them as ministers of the 5th ditch takes from them all power to leave it. Down there we found a painted people who were walking with very slow steps, weeping and, by their expressions, weary and defeated. They were wearing robes with hoods pulled low over their eyes, made in the fashion that is sewn in Cluny for the monks. On the outside they are dazzlingly gilded, but within they are all of lead, so heavy that the ones Frederick put on people might have been of straw. O eternally laborious mantle! We turned once more to the left with them, attentive to their sad weeping. but because of the weight, those weary people came on so slowly that we had a new companion with each motion of our hips. Therefore, I said to my leader, "Try to find someone known by deed or name, moving your eyes about as we walk." And one who understood my Tuscan speech behind us called, "Stay your feet, you who are running so through the dark air. Perhaps you will have from me what you desire." And so my leader turned and said, "Wait, and then walk at his pace." I stood still and saw two showing in their faces great haste of the spirit to be with me. But their burden slowed them, and the crowded way. When they had reached me, for a long time they looked at me sidelong without saying a word. Then they turned to each other and spoke together. "That one seems alive, by the motion of his throat, but if they are dead, by what privilege are they exempt from the weighty stole?" Then they spoke to me. "O Tuscan, who have come to the college of the sad hypocrites, do not disdain to say who you are." And I to them, "I was born and raised beside the lovely river Arno in the great city, and I am here with the body I have always had. But who are you, whose great pain distills all I see trickling down your cheeks? And what punishment is in you that sparkles so?" And one replied, "The orange robes are so thick with lead that the weights make their balances creak. We were jolly friars, and from Bologna. I am Catalano, and he Lodoringo, and taken both together by your city. Though the custom is to take a single man, to preserve the peace, and we were such that it still appears around the Gardingo." I began, "O friars, you're evil," but I said no more, for into my view came one crucified to the earth with 3 stakes. When he saw me, he twisted himself all over, puffing into his beard with sighs, and Brother Catalano, who perceived it, told me, "That one staked there, at whom you are looking, counseled the Pharisees that it was expedient to put one man to death for the people." He stretched naked out across the road, as you see, so that whoever passes, he must feel his weight first. And his father-in-law is laid out in the same way in this ditch, and the others of the council that sowed so ill for the Jews. Then I saw Virgil, marveling over him who was so basely stretched crosswise in the eternal exile. Then he directed to the friar this word, "Let it not displease you, if it is permitted, to tell us if on the right hand some passage slopes whereby we can both climb out of here, without requiring any of the black angels to come to this bottom to transport us." So he replied, "Closer than you hope. We are approaching a ridge that goes from the largest circle across all the savage valleys, except that in this one it is broken and does not cover it. You will be able to climb up along the landslide, which slopes gently up the side and is heaped up at the bottom." My leader stood a little with his head bent down, then he said, "Ill did he recount the business, who hooks the sinners on this side." And the friar, "In Bologna I once heard many vices of the devil told, among which I heard that he is a liar and the father of lies." Then my leader walked off with great strides, his face a little disturbed with anger. So I left the burdened ones, following the prints of his dear feet. Canto XXIV. In that part of the youthful year when the sun tempers its locks under Aquarius, and already the nights are moving south, when on the ground the frost copies the image of her white sister, but her pen retains its temper only briefly, the peasant, his provisions running short, rises to look and sees the fields all white, and he strikes his thigh, goes back in his house, and complains here and there, like a wretch who knows not what to do. Then he goes forth again and stores hope in his wicker basket again, seeing the face of the world has changed in a short time, and he takes his crook and drives the little sheep forth to pasture. So my master made me lose confidence when I saw his brow so clouded, and just as quickly he applied the plaster to the wound. For, when we came to the ruined bridge, my leader turned to me with the sweet expression I first saw at the foot of the mountain. After first having taken counsel with himself by examining the ruin carefully, he opened his arms and took hold of me, and like one who uses judgment as he acts, always seeming to look ahead, so carried me up to the top of one rock. He would look to another great splinter, saying, "Pull yourself up to that one next, but first test whether it will hold your weight." It was not a path for anyone wearing a cloak, since only with difficulty, though he was light and I was pushed from below, were we able to climb from outcrop to outcrop. And were it not that there the wall was shorter than on the other side, I do not know about him, but I would have been quite overcome. But because all Malebolge slopes toward the opening of the lowest pit, the nature of each valley requires that one wall be steep, the other low. Finally, we reached the point where the last rock had broken off. My breath was so milked from my lungs when I arrived there that I could go no further, but rather sat down as soon as we arrived. "From now on you will have to cast off sloth in this way," said my master, "for one does not gain fame sitting on down cushions or while under coverlets, and whoever consumes his life without fame leaves a mark of himself on earth like smoke in the air or foam in the water. And therefore stand up, conquer your panting with the spirit that conquers in every battle, if it does not let the heavy body crush it down. A longer ladder must we climb. It is not enough to have left those others behind. If you understand me, now act so that it may help you." I stood up then, pretending to be better furnished with breath than I felt, and said, "Go, for I am strong and bold." Up along the ridge we took our way, which was jagged, narrow, and difficult, and much steeper than the last. I was speaking as I went, so as not to seem feeble, and then a voice came from the next ditch, unapt to form words. I do not know what it said, although I was already mounting the arch that crosses there, but the speaker seemed to be moved to anger. I was looking downward, but my sharp eyes could not attain the bottom because of the dark, and I, "Master, when you reach the next belt, let us descend from the ridge, for as from here I hear but cannot understand, so I look down but make nothing out." "No other reply," he said. "Do I give then action? For a virtuous request should be obeyed without discussion." We came down from the bridge head where it joins the 8th bank, and then the pouch was made to manifest me, and I saw within it a terrible crowding of serpents, and of such a strange kind that the memory still curdles my blood. Let Libya brag of its sands no more, for if it produces Kelidri, Iaculi, and Faray, and Chenkri, with Amphizibana, never did it show so many pestilences, nor so poisonous, together with all Ethiopia and what lies beyond the Red Sea. Amid this harsh and savage plenty were running naked, terrified people, without hope of a crevice or a heliotrope. Their hands were bound behind them with snakes. These thrust through the loins their tails and heads, and were knotted in front. And behold, a serpent hurled itself at one near our bank, and transfixed him where the neck is knotted to the shoulders. Neither O.I. nor I has ever been written so fast as he caught fire and burned and was all consumed, falling to ashes. And when he was on the ground, destroyed, the dust gathered together by itself and instantly became the same one again. Thus the great sages profess that the phoenix dies and is reborn when it approaches its 500th year. In its life it eats neither grass nor grain, but only tears of incense and balsam, and nard and myrrh are its winding sheet. And like one who falls, he knows not how, by the force of a demon that pulls him to the earth, or of some other occlusion that can bind a man. When he stands up, he gazes about all dismayed by the great anguish he has suffered, and sighs as he looks. Such was the sinner when he stood up. Oh, the power of God, how severe it is, what torrents of punishment it pours forth. My leader then asked him who he was, and he replied, I rained down from Tuscany, not long ago, into this fierce throat. Bestial life pleased me, not human mule that I was. I am Vanni Fucci, the beast. And Pistoia was a worthy lair for me. And I to my leader, tell him not to sneak off, and ask him what sin drove him down here, for I saw him a bloody, wrathful man. And the sinner, who heard, did not feign, but turned to me his mind and his face, and was covered with sad shame. Then he said, It pains me more to be caught in the wretchedness where you see me, than when I was taken from the other side. I cannot refuse what you ask. I am placed so far down because I stole the beautiful appointments from the sacristy, and it was falsely blamed on others. But lest you joy in seeing me, if you ever get out of these dark places, open your ears to my message and listen. Pistoia first thins itself of blacks, then Florence makes new its laws and people. Mars draws from Val di Magra a hot wind wrapped in roiling clouds, and with impetuous, bitter violence. They will fight above Campo Piceno, and he will suddenly break the cloud, so that every white will be stricken by it. And I have told you this, that it may grieve you. Canto XXV. At the end of his words, the thief raised his hands with both the figs, crying, Take them, God, I'm aiming at you. From then on, snakes have been my friends, because one of them wrapped itself around his neck, as if to say, I won't let him say more, and another around his arms, and bound them up, tying itself so tight in front that he could not budge. Ah, Pistoia, Pistoia, why do you not decree your incineration, so that you may not endure, since you surpass your sowers in doing ill? Through all the dark circles of hell I saw no spirit so proud against God, not him who fell from the wall at Thebes. He fled without saying another word, and I saw a centaur, full of rage, come crying, Where is he? Where is he? The unripe one. I do not think Maremma has any water snakes, as he had on his back from the rump to where our shape begins. On his shoulders, behind his nape, lay a dragon spreading its wings. It sets fire to any they meet. My master said, That is Cacus, who beneath the rock of Mount Aventine many times made a lake of blood. He does not follow the same path as his brothers, because he fraudulently stole the great herd he found close by. Therefore, his cross-eyed deeds ended under Hercules' club, which perhaps gave him 100, but he did not feel 10 of them. As he was speaking, the centaur went by, and 3 spirits came below us, whom neither I nor my leader perceived until they cried, Who are you? For this reason, our talk ceased, and they alone claimed our attention. I did not know them, but it happened, as it often does by some chance, that one of them had to name another, saying, Where has Cianfa stayed? Therefore I, so that my leader should pay attention, stretched my finger from chin to nose. If now, reader, you are slow to believe what I say, that will be no marvel, for I, who saw it, hardly allow it. As I was raising my brows toward them, a serpent with 6 feet threw itself on one of them and embraced him closely. Its middle feet wrapped around his waist. With its 4 feet, it seized his arms. Then it pierced both his cheeks with fangs. Its hind feet it spread along his thighs, and put its tail between them, extending it up along his loins. Ivy never took root on a tree so tightly as the horrible beast grew vine-like around the other's limbs. After they had adhered to each other like hot wax, and had mixed their colors, neither seemed what it had been. As, when paper burns, a dark color moves up it, preceding the flame. It is not yet black, but the white is dying. The other two were staring at him, and each cried, "Oh me, Agnel, how you are changing. See, already you are neither two nor one." Already the two heads had become one, so that two sets of features seemed mingled in one face, where two heads were lost. The arms became two strips from four, the thighs and the legs and the belly and the chest became members never before seen. Every former appearance there was shattered. Two and none, the perverse image seemed, and off it moved with slow steps. As the lizard, changing hedges under the great scourge of the dog days, seemed lightning as it crosses the road, so seemed an inflamed little serpent, livid and black like a grain of pepper, coming toward the bellies of the other two, and one of them it pierced in the place where our first nourishment is taken. Then it fell stretched out before him. The one transfixed gaze at it, but it said nothing. Rather, standing still, he yawned, as if sleep or fever assailed him. He was gazing at the serpent, and the serpent at him. One through his wound, and the other through its mouth, was sending forth smoke, and the smoke met. Let Lucan now be silent, where he touches on miserable Sabellus and Nasidius, and let him wait to hear what strikes. About Cadmus and Arethusa let Ovid be silent, for if in his poetry he converts him into a serpent and her into a fountain, I do not envy him, for never two natures face to face did he transmute so that both forms were ready to exchange their matter. They answered each other according to this rule, that the serpent split its tail in two, and the wounded one drew his soles together. His legs and thighs so adhered that soon the joining left no mark that could be seen. The cleft tail took the shape the other was losing, and its skin softened, but over there it hardened. I saw both his arms withdraw into the armpits, and the beast's 2 feet, which were short, lengthen as much as the others were shortening. Then the hind feet, twisted together, became the member which a man hides, and the other wretch out of his had extended 2 feet, while the smoke veils both of them with a new color, generating hair on one side and peeling it off on the other. One stood up and the other fell down, but they did not turn aside their pitiless lanterns, under whose gaze each was changing his snout. He who was erect drew his in toward the temples, and of the excess matter made ears that came out over narrow cheeks. What of that excess did not go to the rear became a nose for the face and filled out the cheeks as much as was fitting. He who was lying down extends his snout forward and withdraws his ears into his head as the snail does its horns. And his tongue, which had previously been whole and ready to speak, it split, and the other's forked one it joined, and the smoke stops. The soul who had become a beast fled hissing through the valley, and the other spits as he speaks after him. Then he turned his new back on him and said to the other, I want Buoso to run, as I have, on all sixes along this path. Thus I saw the 7th cargo change, and change again, and here let the novelty excuse me if my pen ever falters. And although my eyes were somewhat confused, and my spirit robbed of power, the souls could not flee so secretly that I did not see clearly Puccios and Canto, and he alone, of the three companions who had arrived earlier, had not been changed. The other was the one that makes you, Gavile, weep. Canto XXVI. Rejoice, Florence, since you are so great that on sea and land you beat your wings, and your name spreads through hell. Among the thieves I found 5 such citizens of yours that I feel shame, and you do not rise to honor by them. But if near morning one dreams the truth, you will feel, a short time from now, something of what Prado, not to speak of others, desires for you. And if it had not already come, it would not be early. Would it already were, since it must come, for it will weigh on me more, the older I grow. We left, and up along the steps made for us earlier by the projecting bournes, my leader mounted, carrying me. And as we pursued our solitary way among the splinters and rocks of the ridge, our feet could not proceed without our hands. Then I grieved, and now I grieve again, when I consider what I saw, and I rein in my wit more than is my custom, that it may not run without virtue guiding it, so that, if a good star, or something better, has given me what is good, I may not deprive myself of it. As many fireflies as the peasant, resting on the hillside in the season when he who lights the world least hides from us his face. When the fly gives way to the mosquito, sees down along the valley, perhaps where he harvests and plows. With so many flames the 8th pocket was all shining, as I perceived when I was where I could see its depths. And he who avenged himself with the bears saw Elijah's chariot departing, when the horses rose so steeply to heaven, that he could not follow them with his eyes so as to see more than the flame alone, like a little cloud rising up. So each moves along the throat of the ditch, for none displays its theft, and every flame steals away a sinner. I was standing erect on the bridge in order to see, so that if I had not grasped a projection, I would have fallen without being pushed. And my leader, who saw me so intent, said, "Within the fires are the spirits. Each is swathed in that which burns him inwardly." "My master," I replied, "hearing you I am surer. But already it seemed to me that such was the case, and already I wanted to ask you, who is in that fire that comes so divided above that it seems to be rising from the pyre, where Eteocles was put with his brother?" He answered me, "There within are punished Ulysses and Diomedes. Thus together they go to punishment as they went to anger. And within their flame they bemoan the deceit of the horse that made the gate to send forth the Romans' noble seed. There within they weep for the art that makes Deidamia, though dead, still grieve for Achilles, and there they bear the punishment for the Palladium." "If they can speak within those flames," I said, "Master, much do I beg you, and beg again that each prayer may be worth 1,000. That you do not refuse to wait until the horned flame comes here. See that I bend toward it with desire." And he to me, "Your prayer is worthy of much praise, and therefore I grant it, but see that your tongue restrain itself. Let me speak, for I have conceived what you wish, for perhaps they would shun, because they were Greeks, your words." When the flame had come to where my leader thought it the time and place, in this form I heard him speak. "O you who are two within one fire, if I deserved from you while I lived, if I deserved from you greatly or little, when in the world I wrote my high verses, do not move away, but let one of you tell where, lost, he went to die." The greater horn of the ancient flame began to shake, murmuring, like one a wind belabors. Then, moving its peak here and there, as if it were a tongue that spoke, it cast out a voice that said, When I departed from Circe, who held me back more than a year there near Gaeta, before Aeneas gave it that name, neither the sweetness of a son, nor compassion for my old father, nor the love owed to Penelope, which should have made her glad, could conquer within me the ardor that I had to gain experience of the world and of human vices and worth. But I put out on the deep, open sea alone, with one ship, and with that little company by which I had not been deserted. The one shore and the other I saw as far as Spain, as far as Morocco, and the island of the Sardinians, and the others whose shores are bathed by that sea. I and my companions were old and slow when we came to that narrow strait, which Hercules marked with his warnings, so that one should not go further. On the right hand I had left Seville. On the other, I had already left Seta. O brothers, I said, who through 100,000 perils have reached the west, to this so brief Virgil of our senses that remains, do not deny the experience following the sun of the world without people. Consider your sowing. You were not made to live like brutes, but to follow virtue and knowledge. My companions I made so sharp for the voyage with this little oration that after it I could hardly have held them back. And, turning our stern toward the morning, of our oars we made wings for the mad flight, always gaining on the left side. Already all the stars of the other pole I saw at night, and our own pole so low that it did not rise above the floor of the sea. 5 times renewed, and as many diminished, had been the light beneath the moon, since we had entered the deep pass, when there appeared to us a mountain, dark in the distance, and it seemed to me higher than any I had seen. We rejoiced, but it quickly turned to weeping. For from the new land a whirlwind was born and struck the forequarter of the ship. 3 times it made the ship to turn about with all the waters, and the 4th to raise it from stern aloft, and the prow to go down, as it pleased another, until the sea had closed over us. Canto XXVII. Already the flame was erect and quiet, no longer speaking, and already it had left us with the permission of my sweet poet, when another, coming after it, made us turn our eyes to its peak because of a confused sound coming out from it, as the Sicilian bull which first bellowed with the cries of him, and that was right, who had tempered it with his file, used to bellow with the voice of the afflicted one, so that, though made of brass, it still seemed transfixed with pain. So, not having any path or outlet from its origin within the fire, the anguished words were converted into its language. But after they had found their way up to the tip, imparting to it that wriggling which the tongue had given them in their passage, we heard it say, O you to whom I direct my voice, and who were just now speaking Lombard, saying, Istra you may go, I incite you no further. Though I have arrived perhaps somewhat late, let it not grieve you to stay and speak with me. You see it does not grieve me, and I am burning. If you just now fell into this blind world from that sweet Italian earth whence I bring all my guilt, tell me if the people of Romagna have peace or war, for I was from the mountains there between Urbino and the ridge whence Tiber is unleashed. I went still bent over, intent upon him, when my leader prodded my side, saying, You speak, this one is Italian. And I, having my reply already prepared, without delay began to speak. O soul hidden down there, your Romagna is not, and never was, without war in the hearts of its tyrants. But no open war did I leave there now. Ravenna is as it has been for many years. The eagle of Polenta broods over it, covering Cervia with its pinions. The city that underwent the long trial and made a bloody heap of the French now finds itself beneath the green claws. The old and young mastiffs of Verrucchio, who guarded Montagna ill, as they are accustomed, make drills of their teeth. The cities of Limone and Santerno are led by the lion cub in the white nest, who changes alliances between summer and winter. And the city whose flank the Savio bathes, just as it lies between the plain and the mountain, so lives between tyranny and liberty. Now who you are, I beg you to tell us. Do not be harder than others have been to you, so may your name hold up its brow in the world. After the flame had roared a bit in its manner, it moved its sharp tongue here and there, and then gave forth this breath. If I believed that my reply were to a person who would ever return to the world, this flame would remain without further shaking. But since never from this depth has anyone returned alive, if I hear the truth without fear of infamy, I answer you. I was a man of arms, and then I was a Franciscan, believing, so girt, to make amends, and surely my belief would have been fulfilled, had it not been for the high priest. May evil take him, who put me back into my first sins. And how, and qua re, I wish you to hear from me. While I was the form of bone and flesh that my mother gave me, my works were not those of a lion, but a fox. The tricks and the hidden ways, I knew them all, and so I piled their art that the flame of it went out to the ends of the earth. When I saw I had reached that part of my life where every man should lower the sails and coil the ropes, what earlier pleased me, then grieved me, and I gave myself up repentant and shriven. Ah, miserable wretch that I am! And it would have worked. The prince of the new Pharisees, making war near the Lateran, and not against Saracens or Jews, for each of his enemies was a Christian, and none had been to take Acre, nor a merchant in the Sultan's lands, regarded neither his highest office nor holy orders in himself, nor in me the rope that used to make its wearers thinner. But as Constantine asked Sylvester in Soracte to cure him of leprosy, so he asked me to teach him to recover from his proud fever. He asked my advice, and I was silent, for his words seemed drunken. Then he said again, "Let not your heart fear. Henceforth I absolve you, if you teach me how to raise Palestrina to the ground. Heaven I can lock and unlock, as you know. For that reason the keys are two which my predecessor did not prize." Then his weighty arguments impelled me, for silence seemed to me the worst course, and I said, "Father, since you wash me of that sin into which I now must fall, a long promise with a short keeping will make you triumph on your high throne." Francis came later, but when I had died for me. But one of the black cherubim told him, "Do not take him, do not wrong me. He must come down among my slaves, because he gave the fraudulent counsel, since when, until now, I have been at his locks. For he cannot be absolved who does not repent, nor can one repent and will together, because of the contradiction which does not permit it. O wretched me, how I trembled when he seized me, telling me, 'Perhaps you did not think I was a logician.' He carried me to Minos, and that one twisted his tail 8 times about his hard back, and after he had bitten it in his great rage, he said, 'This is one who deserves the thieving fire,' so that I am lost here where you see me, and thus clothed I go tormenting myself. When it had finished speaking thus, the grieving flame departed, twisting and beating about with its sharp horn. We passed further, both I and my leader, up among the ridge as far as the next arch, which covers the ditch where the toll is collected from those who gain cargo by putting apart. Canto XXVIII. Who could ever, even with unbound words, tell in full of the blood and wounds that I now saw, though he should narrate them many times? Every tongue would surely fail, because our language and our memory have little capacity to comprehend so much. If one gathered together all the people who ever, on the travailed earth of Apulia, groaning poured forth their blood on account of the Trojans, and in the long war that took such heaped spoils of rings, as Livy writes, who does not err, and the people who suffered wounds when resisting Roberto Guiscardo, and the others whose bones are still being collected at Chaparano, where every Apulian was a liar, and at Tagliacazzo, where old Elard, one without arms, and this one showed his perforated, this one his truncated member. It would be nothing to equal the wretched mode of the ninth pocket. Surely a barrel, losing centerpiece or half moon, is not so broken as one I saw, broken from the chin to where it farts. Between his legs dangled his intestines. The pluck was visible, and the wretched bag that makes shit of what is swallowed. While I was all absorbed in the sight of him, he, gazing back at me, with his hands opened up his breast, saying, "Now see how I spread myself. See how Muhammad is torn open. Ahead of me, Ali goes weeping, his face cloven from chin to forelock. And all the others you see here were sowers of scandal and schism while they were alive, and therefore are they cloven this way. There is a devil back there who carves us so cruelly, putting the edge of his sword to each in this ream once we have circled through the suffering road, for the wounds have closed before any confronts him again. But who are you sniffing at us from up on the ridge, perhaps to delay going to the punishment decreed on your crimes?" "Death has not reached him yet, nor does guilt lead him," replied my master, "into torment, but so that he may have full experience. I, who am dead, must lead him through hell, down here from circle to circle, and this is as true as I am speaking to you." More than 100 were they who, hearing him, stopped in the ditch to gaze up at me in amazement, forgetting their suffering. "Now then, you who will perhaps shortly see the sun, tell brother Dolcino, if he does not want to follow me soon down here, to provide himself with enough food that the barrier of snow may give not the victory to the Novarese, which otherwise would not be easy to acquire." Holding one foot lifted to walk away, Muhammad spoke this word to me. Then, departing, he set it down. Another, whose throat was bored through, his nose cut up to his eyebrows, and with only one ear, stopping to gaze up at me in amazement with the others. First of the others opened his windpipe, which was all covered with crimson, and said, "O you whom guilt does not condemn, and whom I saw in Italy, if too close a resemblance does not deceive me, remember Pierre of Medicina if you ever return to see the lovely plain sloping down from Vercelli to Marcabo, and tell the two best men of Fano, Messer Guido and Angiolello, that, if foresight is not empty here, they will be thrown from their vessel in a weighted sack and drowned near Catolica, thanks to the treachery of a wicked tyrant. Between the islands of Cyprus and Majolica, Neptune has never seen so great a sin done, not by pirates, not by Argolians. That traitor who sees with only one eye, who holds the city that my fellow wishes he had still to see, will have them come to parley. He will bring it about that they need no vows or prayers against the Focaro wind. And I to him, show me and explain, if you wish me to carry news back up about you, who is the one of the bitter sight. Then he put his hand to the jaw of one of his companions and opened his mouth for him, crying, This is he, and he cannot speak. He, an exile, drowned Caesar's doubts, affirming that one prepared always suffers from delay. Oh, how dismayed Curio seemed, with the tongue cut out of his throat. He who was so bold to speak, and one who had both hands cut off, lifting the stumps in the murky air so that the blood soiled his face, cried, You will remember Mosca, too, who said, Alas, a thing done is done, the seed of evil for the Tuscans. And I added, And the death of your clan, so that he, piling grief on grief, walked off like a person mad with sorrow. But I remained to gaze at the host, and I saw something that I would fear, without more proof, even to retell, except that my conscience makes me confident. The good companion that frees a man, if it wears the hauberk of knowing itself pure. I surely saw, and it seems I still see, a torso without a head, walking like the others of the sorry flock. And his severed head he was holding up by the hair, dangling it from his hand like a lantern, and the head was gazing at us, saying, Oh me! Of himself he made a lamp for himself, and they were two in one, and one in two. How that can be, he knows who so disposes. When he was directly at the foot of the bridge, he raised his arm far up, head and all, to bring his words close to us, which were, Now see my wretched punishment. You who go still breathing to view the dead, see if any is great as this. And that you may take back news of me, know that I am Bertrand de Born, he who gave the young king the bad encouragements. I made father and son revolt against each other. Achitophel did no worse to Absalom and David with his evil proddings. Because I divided persons so joined, I carry my brain divided, alas, from its origin, which is in this trunk. Thus you observe in me the counter-suffering. Canto XXIX. The multitude of people and their strange wounds had so inebriated my eyes that they longed to stay and weep. But Virgil said to me, Why do you still stare? Why does your sight still dwell on those wretched, mutilated shades down there? You did not act thus at the other pockets. Think, if you believe you could number them, that the valley turns for 22 miles. And already the moon is beneath our feet. Little remains of the time granted us, and there are other things to see that you do not see. If you had attended, I then answered him, to the cause for which I was staring, perhaps you would have permitted me to stay longer. Meanwhile my leader walked on, with me behind him, already replying and adding, Within that hollow, where just now I was fixing my eyes, I think a spirit of my blood is weeping for the guilt that cost so much down there. Then, said my master, let not your thought break over him from now on. Attend to other things, and let him stay there. For I saw him at the foot of the bridge, pointing at you and threatening fiercely with his finger, and I heard him called Jerry del Bello. You were then so caught by him who held Altoforte that you did not look there, and he went off. Oh, my leader, his violent death, as yet unavenged, I said, by anyone who shares the shame of it, has made him full of scorn. Therefore, he walked away without speaking to me, as I judge, and that has made me more compassionate toward him. Thus we talked as far as the first place on the ridge to show the next valley, if there were more light there, down to its bed. When we were above the last cloister of Malebolge, so that its converts could appear to our sight, strange lamenting struck me, arrows whose iron heads were made of pity, so that I covered my ears with my hands. What the suffering would be if the sick from the hospitals of Valdiciana between July and September, and from Maremma and Sardinia, were all in one ditch together. Such was it there, and a stench came from it like that from rotting limbs. We climbed down to the last bank from the long ridge, still to the left, and then my sight was livelier down toward the bottom, where the minister of the Lord, infallible justice, punishes the falsifiers that it registers here. I do not believe it was a greater sadness to see in Aegina the whole people sick, when the air was so full of malice that the animals, down to the little worm, all fell, and then the ancient people, according to what the poets firmly believe, were restored from the seed of ants. Than it was to see, along the dark valley, the spirits languishing in different heaps. This one lay over another's stomach, that one over another's shoulders, and this one crawling transmuted himself down the evil road. Step by step we walked without speech, seeing and hearing the sick, who could not lift their bodies. I saw two sitting propped against each other, as one props pan against pan to cool, both from head to foot, all spotted with scabs. And I have never seen a currycomb so piled by a boy awaited by his master, or by one who unwilling stayed awake, as each one of them piled the bite of his fingernails on himself, for the great rage of the itch, which no longer has any remedy. Their nails tore off the scabs like knives, scaling bream, or some other fish with larger scales. O you who unravel yourself with your fingers, began my leader to one of them, and at times make pincers of them. Tell us if any Italian is among those in here, so may your nail suffice eternally for this work. We are Italians, whom you see so ruined here, both of us, one replied weeping. But who are you who have asked about us? And my leader said, I am one descending with this living man from ledge to ledge, and I intend to show him hell. Then the mutual support was broken, and trembling each of them turned to me, along with others who heard the words as if by echo. My good master drew near to me, saying, Say to them what you wish, and I began, since he wished it. So may your memory not be stolen from human minds in the first world, so may it live for many sons. Tell me who you are, and of what people. Let not your filthy and annoying punishment make you fear to reveal yourselves to me. I was from Arezzo, and Albero of Siena, replied one, sent me to the fire, but what I died for is not what leads me here. It is true that I told him, joking, I could raise myself through the air in flight, and he, who had eagerness but little sense, wanted me to show him the art, and only because I did not make him Daedalus, he had me burned by one who loved him as a son. But to the last pocket of the 10 for alchemy which I practiced in the world, Minos damned me, who may not err. And I said to my poet, now was there ever a people so foolish as the Senese? Certainly not the French by far. And the other leper who heard me replied to my word. Except for Strica, he knew how to spend moderately. And Nicholas, who first discovered the rich custom of cloves in the garden where that seed takes root, and except for the crew for whom Caccia Dashan used up his vineyard and his great farmlands, and to whom, bedazzled, displayed his wisdom. But so that you may know who seconds you against the Sienese, sharpen your eye toward me, that my face may answer to you. Then you will see that I am the shade of Capocchio, who falsified metals with alchemy, and you must remember, if I eye you well, how good an ape I was of nature. Canto 30. In the time when, because of Semele, Juno was angry against the blood of Thebes, as she showed once and again, Atamas became so insane that, seeing his wife walking with his 2 sons on either hand, he cried, "Spread the nets, so that I may catch the lioness and her cubs at the crossing." And then he stretched out his pitiless claws, taking the one whose name was Lurcus, and whirled him and struck his head against a rock, and she drowned herself with her other burden. And when fortune leveled to the ground the pride of the Trojans, all aflame, so that along with his kingdom the king was broken, Hecuba, sorrowing, wretched, and a captive, after she saw Polyxena dead and grieving, had perceived her Polydorus on the shore of the sea, going mad, she barked like a dog, her grief had so twisted her mind. But neither Theban, Furies, nor Trojan ever made anyone so cruel, not to wound beasts, let alone human limbs, as 2 pallid, naked shades I saw, who ran biting in the manner of the pig when the sty is opened. One reached Capocchio and set his tusk into the knot of his neck so that, dragging, he made him scratch his belly on the solid floor. And the Aretine, who remained trembling, told me, "That goblin is Gianni Schicchi, and in his rage he goes treating others so." "Oh," I said to him, "so may the other not set his teeth in you. Let it not be a labor to tell me who he is before he disappears." And he to me, "That is the ancient soul of wicked Mira, who became, beyond right love, her father's lover. She came to sin with him by counterfeiting herself in another's shape, just as the other who goes off there, to gain the queen of the herd, dared to counterfeit in himself Buos Odontani, making a will and giving it legal form." And when the 2 rabid shades on whom I had kept my eyes had passed, I turned to gaze at the other ill-born ones. I saw one made in the shape of a lute, if he had had his groin cut from the other forked part, the heavy dropsy that so unpairs the members with the liquid that it ill converts, that the face does not answer to the belly, made him hold his lips open, as a fevered person does, who in his thirst turns one of them down toward his chin and the other upward. O you who are without any punishment, and I know not why, in this grim world, he said to us, gaze and attend to the wretchedness of Master Adam, alive. I had much of whatever I wished, and now, alas, I crave a drop of water. The little streams that form the green hills of the Casentino come down into Arno, making their channels cool and moist. Always stand before me, and not in vain, for their image drives me far more than the disease that robs my face of flesh. The rigid justice that probes me takes occasion from the place where I sinned, to put my sighs the more to flight. There is Ravenna, where I falsified the alloy sealed with the Baptist, for which I left my body burned up there. But if I might see here the wicked soul of Guido or Alessandro or their brother, for Fontebrana I would not trade the sight. One of them has already come, if the raging shades who run about here tell the truth. But what does it help me, since my members are bound? If I were just so light that in 100 years I could go 1 inch, I would have already set out on the path, searching through all this filthy people, although it turns for 11 miles and is no less than 1 across. Because of them, I am among such a household. They induced me to mint the florins that had 3 carats of dross. And I to him, Who were the two wretches, smoking like wet hands in winter, lying close on your right-hand boundary? Here I found them, and since they have not even turned over, he replied, when I rained down into this pit, and I do not believe they will for eternity. One is the false woman who accused Joseph, the other is false Sinon of Troy. Because of acute fever, they throw out such a stench. And one of them, who perhaps resented being named so darkly, with his fist stuck him on his taut belly, that resounded as if it were a drum. And Master Adam struck the other's face with his arm, which seemed no less hard, saying to him, although I am deprived of movement by my heavy limbs, I have an arm loose for such business. And he replied, when you were going to the fire, you didn't have it so ready, but that much and more you had it when you were coining. And the hydroptic, you say true there, but you were not such a true witness when you were asked for the truth at Troy. If I spoke falsely, you falsified the coinage, said Sinon. And I am here for one fault, but you for more than any other demon. Remember, perjurer, the horse, replied he of the swollen liver, and let it be bitter to you that the whole world knows of it. And to you bitter be the thirst that cracks, said the Greek, your tongue and the stagnant water that makes of your belly a hedge before your eyes. Then the coiner, your mouth gapes because of your disease, as usual, for if I am thirsty and liquid swells me, you have burning fever and a head that aches, and to lick the mirror of Narcissus, you would not need to be invited with many words. I was all intent to listen to them, when my master said to me, now keep looking, for I am not far from quarreling with you. When I heard him speak to me angrily, I turned toward him with such shame that it still dizzies me in memory. Like one who dreams of harm and, dreaming, wishes he were dreaming, so that he yearns for what is as if it were not. So I became, unable to speak, wishing to excuse myself, and I was excusing myself all along, though I did not think so. Less shame washes away a greater fault, said my master, than yours has been. Therefore, cast off all sorrow, and mind that I be always at your side, if it happens again that fortune finds you where people are in such squabble, for to wish to hear that is a base desire.
Canto XXXI. One and the same tongue first stung me so that both my cheeks were stained, and then held out the medicine to me. So I hear that the spear of Achilles and his father was the cause first of ill and then of good reward. We turned our backs on the wretched valley, up along the bank that girds it round, crossing over without further speech. Here it was less than night and less than day, so that my sight did not pierce far ahead, but I heard the sound of a horn so loud that it would make any thunder feeble, which drew my eyes straight to one place, following its path backward. After the dolorous rout, when Charlemagne lost the Holy Company, Roland did not sound his horn so terribly. I had not long held my head turned there, when I seemed to see many high towers. Therefore I, Master, say, what city is this? And he to me, because your sight traverses the shadows from too far away, your imagining is blurred. You will see clearly, when you reach it, how sense is deceived by distance. Therefore drive yourself a little further. Then he took me affectionately by the hand and said, before we are any closer, so that the fact may seem less frightening to you, know that they are not towers, but giants, and they are in the pit, around its rim, from the navel downward, all of them. As, when mist dissolves, the gaze little by little makes out the shape of what the vapor-thickened air had hidden, so, boring through the thick, dark atmosphere, drawing closer and closer to the edge, my error fled and my fear grew. For, As above its circling walls, Monte Regione is crowned by towers, so there above the bank that circles the pit, towered with half their persons, the horrible giants, whom Jove still threatens from the sky when he thunders. And I already discerned the face of one, his shoulders and breast, and a large part of his belly, and down his sides, both his arms. Nature surely, when she left off the crafting of animals like those, did well to deprive Mars of such instruments. And if she has not repented of elephants and whales, whoever considers subtly will hold her more just and more discreet. For where sharpness of mind is joined to evil, will, and power, there is no defense people can make against them. His face seemed as long and broad as the pine cone of St. Peter in Rome, and to that proportion were his other bones, so that the bank, which was his apron from the waist down, left so much of him exposed above it that to reach his mane 3 Frisians would have boasted idly, for I saw 30 great spans down from the place where the mantle is clasped. Raphael mai ameche zabi almi, the fierce mouth began to shout, for no gentler psalms befitted it. And my leader toward him, foolish soul, be content with your horn, give vent with that, when anger or some other passion touches you. Feel at your neck, and you will find the thong that holds it, O befuddled soul, and there it is, curving across your breast like a bow. Then he said to me, himself accuses himself, that is Nimrod, because of whose evil thought the world no longer speaks one language. Let us leave him alone and not waste speech, for to him every language is like his to others, unknown. Therefore we took a longer path, turning to the left. At the distance of a crossbow shot, we found the next, much fiercer and larger. Who was the master to bind him, I cannot say, but one arm was held in front and the right arm behind him, by a chain wrapped around him from the neck down, so that on what we saw of him it made 5 full turns. This proud one wished to prove his power against highest Jove, said my leader, and thus is he rewarded. His name is Ephialtes, and he performed great deeds when the giants made the gods afraid. The arm he struck with them, he never moves. And I to him, if it can be, I would wish my eyes to have experience of the immense Briareus. You will see Antaeus near here, who speaks, and is unbound. He will place us at the bottom of all wickedness. He whom you wish to see is much further over there, and he is bound and shaped like this one, except that his face seems fiercer. Never could rough earthquake so violently shake a tower, as Ephialtes suddenly shook himself. Then more than ever I feared death, and the fright alone would have sufficed had I not seen his bonds. We walked further then, and we came to Antaeus, who rose a good 5 ells, not counting his head, out of the pit. O you who once, in the fortunate valley that made Scipio the heir of glory when Hannibal and his men turned tail, brought in 1,000 lions as your catch, and, if you had been present at your brother's great war, it seems some still believe the sons of earth would have been victorious. Set us down, and do not disdain to do so, where the cold locks in Cocytus. Do not make us go to Titius or to Typhon. This man can give what here is desired. Therefore, bend down and do not twist your snout. He can still repay you with fame in the world, for he is alive and expects long life still, if grace does not call him before his time. So spoke my master, and he in haste stretched out his hands, whose powerful grip Hercules once felt, and grasped my leader. Virgil, when he felt himself gripped, said to me, "Come here, that I may hold you." Then he made one bundle of himself and me. As Garizenda appears from below the leaning side when a cloud passes above it so that it seems to fall, so Antaeus appeared as I stood waiting to see him bend over, and that was a time when I would have wished to go by another road. But lightly he set us down on the bottom that devours Lucifer with Judas, nor did he remain bent over, but like the mast of a ship, he raised himself.